my left is Mr. Brian Oliner. Next, Ms. Young-Chan Han.
Very good.
Oh, God. I've been practicing this. I don't want to murder anybody's name. And then, last but not least, Ms. Lili Chi. So, with that said, if you have any questions, the index card has been distributed. Please write them down. Give it to me at the end of the session. I will express the questions and put the panelists on the spot. Please take advantage of this situation. They are very high-powered in the positions they are, and I enjoy seeing them responding to our questions. So with that said, Brian.
Good morning, or afternoon, I guess is where we're at now. Thank you all for coming to our presentation, our little talk here about resources and the immigration available to the immigrant community. The program says I'm from the Office of the Attorney General, but really, I think my credential, so to speak, as to why I'm on the panel and where I come from on this is just being involved in the immigrant community, because I'm American, but for 30 plus years, through marriage, through family, through friends, through the Iran Cultural and Educational Center. Those things, and just curiosity and my own research and my own looking into it have kind of brought me to the point where I sit here before you today. I'm going to just kind of give you an introduction to, in general, what we think about when we think about the immigrant community and resources. Americans, from my own perspective, we're used to the civil society that is America, and civic groups, and government resources, and private resources, and the multitude of things, because that's just how the country developed, and its 220 some plus years of history. And I think that's how the European model was, that there was a lot of dynamic, a lot of groups that worked together, and people did that from whatever it might be, whatever your group and affiliation was. So the question is, why when an immigrant community comes to the United States, or to any community, what and how they can try to access those resources, and what stops them from accessing those resources? I think the first question is always going to be, why does a population immigrate to another country, the United States in particular? And you can kind of push that into two different categories, a push category and the pull category. What pushes you out of the country you're in, and what pulls you to another country. Pushing, escaping from poverty, escaping from persecution, whether it be religious or political persecution, or social persecution. Like I said, poverty, conflict. There could be conflict in the country where your native country, and you're pushed out because of that. Younger people, more recent phenomenon in certain countries is just younger people, and there's no opportunity. They're looking to leave because there's no opportunity in their native country. And then natural resources. Some countries have better natural resources than another has. And the pull to that is, you can almost visualize in your mind right away. The pull to it is just the opposite of those things. Jobs and economic opportunity in other countries that you want to go to. Educational opportunities. You'll hear me say this when I get to specifically how that relates to the Iranian community. Many people that I know of, especially the generation that I'm in, came here for educational opportunity and ended up staying. But that was the impetus. The pull of the United States, and Europe for that matter, was educational opportunity. Family. If you have family, that's another pull, is if you have family living in another country, there is a natural pull to want to be with family. And you pull, that's the pull. And again, nature. Good natural resources in the country that you're going to. So with that in mind, when an immigrant community comes, then we need to think about, well, it's hard. There's not a whole lot of things harder than moving to a new country. And there's not only just the relocation that comes with it, that they talk about the major life events, just moving in, when you move on your own and you don't have immigration as part of it, that's a major life event. You put on top of that moving from another country, that's a big event. And what are the barriers when you get here that are going to be standing in your way to either assimilating into the country and or accessing the resources that are available? The number one, I think we all know, is language, and that's why we have a wonderful school, and the community, the center is such a crucial part of it. But language is always the number one barrier. Economics is another barrier. Depending on your abilities when you're going to immigrate to another country, you may be coming to a situation where you're left because of poverty or repression or something like that. So you're going into a place where, between the language, you may not have the ability to get a decent job. So you're going to be in low-paying jobs, and that creates a barrier right there. Isolation is another barrier that tends to happen. When you immigrate to another country, you tend to immigrate into areas where there are other people like you already at. And then it becomes an isolated community that's just going to be one ethnic group. And that creates a barrier because it makes it that much more difficult to move into and see the resources because, again, you're just isolated. And prejudice and discrimination, obviously, depending on the circumstances under which you came to another country, you're going to experience, or you could experience, prejudice and discrimination. And another one that I've added, I think, are a barrier is institutions that may have existed or not existed in the country you came from and whether they're going to exist in the country that you're going to. I'm Jewish, my background is being Jewish. Jews have immigrated to lots of places, lots of times. But there's always one institution at the heart of the Jewish community, and it wasn't simply there as a religious institution, but it was there as a community institution, and that was the synagogue or the temple. You immigrated, if you were a Jew and you immigrated to another country, you knew that you could join a congregation, and not only to go for prayer, but you could go for family gatherings, you could go for people who were already in that country that could kind of introduce you to those things. If you don't have that kind of institution in the country you came from, obviously it's not going to be in the institution in the country you go to. But I'm not just talking about religious institutions, social clubs. If you're a member of the Masons in Europe or in your native country, you've got the Masons to rely on when you go to a new country. Trade unions. If there's trade unions in the country you came from, or trade groups, and you come to a new country, you can rely on them. But if they don't exist in the country you came from, it's hard to, it's a lack, and it becomes, to me, in my mind, a barrier to your ability to, again, assimilate or to access resources. So with that in mind, we look at, I want to relate this to the Iranian community and what I've seen within the Iranian community to see which of these barriers really exist within our community. And when you think about it, where Iranians live, that's one thing. I mean, statistically, looking at some recent statistics, 8.3% of the Iranian Americans living in the United States live in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area. We all know where most of the rest of them live, out in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Tehrangeles, or Irangeles. So there are concentrations. There's also a large concentration population in New Jersey. It's not to say that there's not Iranian Americans across the country, but these are the concentrations. Interestingly enough, because when most Iranians came to this country, there was three phases of the most recent population coming to the United States. Right around the revolution, and most of those folks that came at that time, like I said before, were already here getting an education, did not expect to stay here, but ended up staying here. And then their family came over and joined them. And again, that first phase around that time frame, just around the revolution and the years afterward, were people that came here with not the intention of staying, thinking they were going to go back, and here we are 30 years later and they're staying here. Which is interesting to the statistic that I have of the Iranian American population living here in the United States, 81% are citizens, have become citizens, 15% are permanent residents, which is a very high figure when you think about it, and consider the fact that a lot of us, and I say us because I consider myself a part of this community, did not intend to stay. Education, 50.9% of the Iranian Americans have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's compared to the national average in the United States of 28%. That's an amazing figure. 1 in 4 have a master's degree or a doctorate degree. Amazing figure. So when you look at those two things, you sit there and say, language and education is not a barrier to this community, to accessing resources. Income. 1 in 3 Iranian Americans have a household annual income of over $100,000 a year. That's compared to the national average of 1 in 5. 20 of the top 20 immigrant groups that are their own business owners, Iranian Americans are right up in there. So again, it doesn't sound like economics is one of the barriers to our community. Discrimination In a poll back in 2008, 50% of the Iranian Americans polled said they had experienced discrimination, so then maybe that's part of it. Which doesn't leave a whole lot of, when we look at what the national studies tell us are barriers to the immigration community, it makes us wonder. And I think looking at that, we're left with the last two groups. Concentration within our own community. Even if we don't all live together in one community, we tend to socialize within one group. And the lack of those institutions in the native country that could transfer easily to the new country. So we don't see those. So that, when you look at it, these are the barriers, at least within our community, that inhibit us or make us cautious about getting to resources. The last one, and maybe just as importantly, is the nature of how the community came here and how it relates to the natural demographics back home in Iran. It's a very diverse political community. It's a very diverse ethnic community. It's a very diverse economic community, which translates when you come to the United States or to another country, staying within. The demographics have stayed the same as they were back home. So if back home in Iran, you didn't see folks interacting that weren't the same, it's not going to happen here, which again, the reason this becomes a barrier is because as we interact with one another, we share each other's experiences, how we access resources that are available in the new community that we come to. And it makes the political issue, makes us leery of going to the government to say, hey, can I access some legal resources that I would be familiar with, or financial resources, or social safety net resources. If you were leery about it back home, you're going to be leery about it here, and it's going to take a couple generations to get through that. So that's the barriers that, the basis of the barriers that we see in our community. And I'll take questions at the end. Turn it over to Young Chan, who's going to be more specific and bring it home to a specific area. Thank you.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dana. I am so happy to be here, and I am so glad that I came first thing in the morning. Saturday, I like to sleep in a little late, but I was encouraged to come in from the beginning, and my glad I did that. So, and when I came, I thought this was your 25th year of doing conferences. I am very impressed. So far. I love every minute of it. Young Chan is my name, and I work for. Is it really?
No, too close to that. It's too close to that. I have an electric field about me.
I work for the Maryland State Department of Education. I work in Title I office and Family Engagement office. And prior to that, I was at Howard County Public School System, which is not too far from here, and I work with international families. So that's where I guess my expertise of working with international families come in place. A couple things I would like to say prior to starting my presentation is that I had the best cookie I have ever had in so many years of my life. Whatever you had, that was so good with pistachios. There's more. I really need more. And what the keynote speaker said this morning actually gave me something to be very proud of, which is I am so proud of having a hyphenated identity. I love it. Even my name is hyphenated. But I love the fact that I am Korean American. I came to this country in 1973 at age, I'm not going to tell you. Whatever. I could be a 1.5 generation, very close to first generation, if you remember the chart from this morning's presentation. And I went through probably what most of you have gone through, and just a quick assessing this room. How many of you were born out of this country? So from Iran. Majority. Anybody who's born in the U.S.? Okay, so you guys are like my children. I have 3 children, and the rest of you are like me. I can say so many things, but let's go ahead and start. I'm going to try to share a little bit about the Maryland school system's diversity, how it has increased since 1993, 20 years ago to now, and also to give you a little bit of Montgomery County's change in diversity as well and go into some of the resources and some of the needs of our families, of our immigrant families. This is what Maryland student enrollment looked like in 1993. Keep an eye on the white. I know it's kind of hard to see from the back. The orange color represents white Americans, race code. Purple is Hispanics. And the green is African American, red, Asian. So we're going to fast forward 20 years. This is Maryland school enrollment, just student enrollment. So it has since 3 or 4, I can't say exactly how many years. It's minority majority flipped, is that how you say it? When white American students are less than 50%, now the rest of the race makes up the rest. So now let's look at Montgomery County. This is 1993. 1993, Montgomery County was pretty diverse as well. Now, fast forward 2020, 2013. Montgomery County is the fastest growing district in Maryland. We have 24 local school systems. Montgomery County is not the biggest, but it's the fastest growing. And you number 151,000 students. Nearly 1/3 of those students, 50,000 students, they come from low-income families, which means that they qualify for free or free and reduced meals. So Montgomery County, in different parts of the county, you have a very affluent community, but you also have a very high poverty community in the county. What I do want to say is, one of the things that we did not track in 1993 is 2 or more races. The light blue is 2 or more races. It's now 5% of our entire enrollment. That's huge. It was not like that before. But if you think about people that you know, there are people that you know, it was, what I guess, 2 races. Like my daughter just got married to a white American. Well, he claims quarter Puerto Rican, so I don't know what that means. But their children will be marked as 2 or more races. So what does all this mean to school and the students and families that we serve? How many of you have students in public schools here? Your parents. Okay, so this will seem real to you. Okay. I'm going to take you back to what it means to, I guess, from a district's perspective, Montgomery County, Howard County, Prince George's County, as well as the state perspective. So here is an example of a young 6th grade, maybe your kids, or maybe when you were here, when you came to this country. I came to this country in 6th grade. Okay. So when you first arrive in this country, even if you speak English, it's a huge challenge. I call this period, this stage, a cultural survivor stage. And when you first come, the language is huge, but the education culture is so different. It's very different regardless what part of it, what other countries you're from. I'm sure Iran, Korea, China. Registration, enrollment, that's the first thing you have to do. It's a monumental challenge. Curriculum, instruction and assessment, that's tough. But you know what's really a challenge for our new immigrants is just understanding, like, what kind of policies dictate our children? Like, do we have regulations for bus transportation? Is there forms that we have to fill out for health issues? All these things are a lot to process and a lot to be able to navigate. That's why it's called cultural survivor stage. Now, during this stage in the schools, what resources are there? Okay. Back 40, 50 years, 30, 40 years when you first came, there weren't that many resources. You were there. Your parents may not speak the English. You were there to survive on your own. In my case, my father was here. He spoke a little bit of English, registered me in grade 6, and the next time they came was at my graduation. And I think a lot of you will probably agree that's probably what happened. they didn't speak the language. And not only that, they had to work, especially my mom, 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day to just put the food on the table. That was the reality. So for me, at that time, I had to survive on my own. But fast forward 30, 40 years, we have ESOL program, everybody's probably familiar with, English for speakers of other languages. We have ELLs, it's English language learners. Educators love acronyms, so instead of saying ESOL students, we say ELLs in ESOL program. So English language learners are in ESOL programs. And what that means is we should have a lot of professionals that know how to educate children going into this country who may not speak English. That's one program. There are a lot of other programs that would help. In Montgomery County, you have a huge office of international student support, international student office. They help you with registration. So I think one thing that I would ask all of you to do, if you're still a parent, to find out what's available by going into Montgomery County Public School System's website. How many of you last month went into the website? Yes. There's a lot of information there about curriculum, just, parent-teacher conferences, what it means. So that's just to kind of give you in a nutshell what we go through as a cultural survivor. So you fast forward a few more years, and at the next stage in education for parent involvement is cultural learner. You are surviving, you're trying to survive day to day, first day, first week, first month, you're a student and a parent as well. The next stage is cultural learner, you're learning. Okay, there's parent-teacher conference 2 times a year. There's a report card 4 times a year. There is a board of directors, board members that make decisions for my children's education. You're learning, it's a cultural learning stage. I think most of you here probably is beyond that. Now, for that stage, cultural learners, what we need to do is learn what is out there. Is there workshops at school that is providing you guys with curriculum and information? Because huge push from the state now is Common Core state standards. Everybody understands. I brought some brochures about that. Common Core state standards. How much do you understand that? Because that's going to be fully implemented by 2013-2014 school year. And that changes a lot of the ways that we teach our children. So if there are workshops, if there are anyone that has questions, you are the one as a parent have to learn and find out where you can learn. So that's a learning stage. The next stage is cultural connectors. That's all of you. Meaning you now have been here for a while, you understand the American culture, you understand the American school system, how to navigate it. What about those that are new? So the programs and services that you're familiar with, you're now helping other people, connecting other people with the resources and services that are available. So that's a cultural connector. What I do want to talk about is cultural leader, because I think that's where most of you are. Cultural leader, and I just put professional, community member, community connector, community leader. That's when you are no longer thinking about your own child's well-being. You're beyond that. You want to make sure that the voice of voiceless population, no matter what that is heard in the classroom, in the school, in the district, and at the state level. So for this ICEC to be the voice for other Iranian population, it's, do I say Iranians, is being a cultural leader. As a parent, you can be a cultural leader by advocating for your culture, your heritage language. So that's where I see the value and the importance of organizations like ICEC. So there are 4 stages that our immigrant parents go through as they acclimate in American schools: cultural survivors, cultural learner, cultural connector, and cultural leader. I know I went way over, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give last few words on the resources, because that's what I'm here to do, right? It's very hard to see. Log on to the Maryland website, marylandpublicschools.org. That's where you will find a lot of information that your children are learning, but the programs and services. And then I do want to talk about a little bit model policy world languages. Please log on to that because last December, state passed a policy about giving credit to heritage language. And we talked about this in the beginning, yes, but the caveat is the district, individual district has to adopt it. The states that set the policy, but it's the district who has to say, okay, we will do it. As of now, none of the districts are doing it. So please log on to that and read a little more about it. That's where the advocacy can be played by all of you. I know, I'm sorry, I went way over. I do want to say, for all of you who, I guess, being a leader, one thing I do want to share is, for somebody else earlier said, go and bring another person to the next conference. But my suggestion, recommendation is, not just another person, but bring in others that, like me, who do not know your culture. I learned so much today that I will go back and not only am I going to share with my colleagues, but if we go back to my church, Korean American church, we have Korean schools, but not like the way you have it. There's a lot to learn. So yes, I think you should bring at least 1 or 2 people, but one of those people should be non-Iranian to the conference that I'm sure you will have next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that we can collect some of the copies of what your presentation and we will post it in our website. So for the statistical data that has been presented, then you will have access to all of it. Now I'd like to ask Ms. Lily Chi for this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. My name is Lily Chi, and thank you for your cultural competency in properly pronouncing my last name. I know as an immigrant, it's always a challenge to have to tolerate people butchering your name, right? So thank you for making the effort. I'm currently working in Montgomery County Executive's Office as Director of Special Projects. I told people that I only do fun projects, which is related to innovation economy and global partnerships. How cool is that, right? But it's really a reflection of who we are as a community and who we are as a capital region. I can tell you that you are at the best place and the time. There are very few other places in the world, I would say, that offers the kind of rich array of resources and opportunities for people of any ages to live a fulfilling life and to feel connected with their own community and the larger community. I'm just so beyond grateful that as an immigrant, an adult immigrant in that matter, sometimes I fool people when they say, oh, you must be born or raised in this country. I came here when I was 25. And I had to learn English all over again. I learned English very hard, but the hard way, which is by reading and writing, the wrong way, right? Any language, you know how to learn the language. You don't learn by reading the grammar, because that's not only hard, but you don't overcome the accent and you don't overcome the listening comprehension and the speaking apprehension, so to speak. But I tried very, very hard to buy a Walkman. If you are old enough to remember the 80s, the Walkman, I call that the iPod of the 80s, and record the lectures from college in order to listen to it in my room again and again, just so that I can understand what the accent was and what they were talking about. So life was not easy when I first came here, but now I look back, my son is in college already, and I'm just very grateful to have become the American woman that I am. And so I originally came from China. In fact, it was a very sweet homecoming just last week. I came back when the county executive, Mr. Leggett, and I led a very large delegation of Montgomery County people of all ethnic backgrounds to visit China for business development. It was fantastic, and I was so glad to do this kind of bridge building work on global stage. So every one of us has these kind of opportunities, whether you want to be a community leader locally, whether you want to offer your cultural competency and awareness and linguistic connection or whatever on a global stage. Sometimes our home country's conditions don't always allow us to do that, but there are many fantastic opportunities. And I want to focus on success factors, and I want to focus on, especially for younger people, how to position yourself as this region positions itself to be something very different from what it used to be. So couple speakers before me talked a little bit very eloquently about this region's demographic changes. How many of you are from Montgomery County? Just, okay. Montgomery County is one of the majority of you. I'm very impressed. Is not only the largest jurisdiction in Maryland, but one of the largest and most diverse in the capital region, which now has about 1 million immigrants total. Out of the total 5 million or so people among the inner core and the urban, which is DC area. This region is dramatically changing in several ways. One is dramatically urbanizing. It used to be, just DC and a bunch of nameless communities that nobody knew. And now we all have competition regionally for economic competitiveness, for people like you and me who are well educated, but speak different languages and all that. And also, with the large immigrant community, what we are seeing is we are defining what is knowledge, what it means to be a knowledge economy, what it means to be a global talent. We're redefining this region in so many ways. It's really a very interesting time. So as the region tries to find itself going forward, there are many opportunities at personal level. What's interesting about this region is, unlike some other parts of this country that are also large and economically vibrant, our immigrant community is relatively new. So the resources that we're trying to relate to you are not always there. In California and New York, with the immigrant traditional gateways, there are a lot of matured resources to help people of different ethnic backgrounds. But in this region, immigrants are creating their own resources in many ways, because we are relatively maturing as communities. And I always believe that Iranians and Chinese are essentially the same people, separated at birth, probably. Because if you look at the Chinese and immigrant community, which is 3/4 of us are immigrants, and the Iranians probably are very similar, and even the Indians, these are very large and cohesive communities. They're very similar in their immigration pattern, in the professions they choose, and the kind of schools the kids go to, and the kind of after-school activities, right? After-school activities, not just soccer, but more academic studies sometimes, and what we consider to be successful. And so the mindset is very, very similar in many regards. But beyond our own communities, there are not many larger community offered resources to support us. So a lot of times what you see is people out of need create their own communities to provide senior services, to provide youth services, to provide after-school programs that are linguistically competent, that don't need interpreters or translators, but instead they speak the language, which is so great because they are doing what a government cannot do in a much lower cost-effective way. Luckily, the Iranian community is among the most successful of all people, not just immigrants, not just minorities or whatever, of all people. So probably the needs for certain kinds of social services are not as great, but that doesn't mean we don't have challenges, So when you look at the economic and dynamic of this region, we have public sector, which is very strong, right? Offers many opportunities and contracting opportunities. When you look at the private sector, it also has an amazing trajectory on its own. And then there's a very large, vibrant nonprofit sector, which is what we call the independent sector. So as a young person, I like to talk to young people. As a young person, you don't have to lock yourself into certain traditional success paths and think that you have to major in certain things or do certain things your parents want you to do, to be a doctor or engineer, in order to be successful. You can position yourself to be versatile and to be multi-skilled, to do many different things and create your own resources, either by taking a different path in your career or serving your own community. And I know Rasa asked me to talk a little bit about community involvement. Community involvement is traditionally perceived as giving back to your community, but when in fact it gives back to you probably more abundantly and in a much more rich fashion than you can possibly give as a one person. For example, if you want to serve on the boards, committees, and commissions, that in and of itself, I don't know if you've heard of what the boards, committees, and commissions are, both at the Maryland state level and in Virginia too, in DC, every jurisdiction, every community for that matter, and in Montgomery County especially, we have a lot of boards, committees, and commissions that need local residents to participate and voice their opinions and weigh in and advise the government on some policy issues, whether it's after-school programs, recreational facilities, whether it's road, pavement, sidewalk, or bike share, or anything, tree trimming, anything, you can name it. These things need citizen participation, or libraries, anything you can think of that affect your life at the local level. We have a board or commission, and that's appointed by the county executive. It's an honor and a prestige to represent your community, and that's a great way to know your neighbors, to know people who are from different cultural background, and to maybe that person can offer you a job. You never know, a contract. That's how we branch out. Ryan mentioned earlier how the patterns of certain community assimilation tend to be holding out to our own ethnic communities, which is great. It provides soft landing, but we do need to lift ourselves beyond that and reach out, because there are greater opportunities for our communities and for ourselves. By giving back, you are receiving much more in return. And also in terms of young people and success factors, a lot of times what I see in immigrant communities is we cannot close the gap between academic achievement and real life success, so to speak. And it's really a loss of talents in my perspective. A lot of times, what I see in the Asian community, and that also applies to many other immigrant communities, is we know how to study, and we get PhDs, we get MDs, we get all kinds of degrees, and we are very good in being independently successful. Okay, as long as success depends on hard work and merit, we are great. But once the success depends on leveraging relationships, who you play golf with, who likes you, that kind of thing, the subtle cultural nuances, then we lose out, because we're immigrants, right? And we don't speak the kind of languages, we don't laugh at the same jokes, we don't wear the sports jerseys and that become part of the club, so to speak. But what I'm trying to do is, through my own life stories, I'm trying to skip a generation. I'm trying to offer leadership in fields that are usually reserved for second or third generation. And I encourage everyone here to do the same, because this is America. Anyone can do anything you want. This is the greatest country in the world, and that's why we are here, right? We shouldn't tell our kids, you can only do this because I know you're going to be successful. You don't have to be a investment broker if you hate that. You can, but if you're going to do something else, by all means do it. So I think how you think oftentimes, and how we culturally are bound by our mindset, a lot of times determines our success, level of success and integration, so to speak. And finally, this region is transitioning from a knowledge-based economy to an innovation-driven economy. If you think about how the economy goes in this region, it's not by mostly shipping goods or manufacturing and things like that. It's very much knowledge-based. We have NIH and FDA. Anybody else in the country can say, oh, we have a bunch of incubators, wet labs, and we have a bunch of very smart IT people. But only in Montgomery County do we have the National Institutes of Health. Only in Montgomery County do we have the Food and Drug Administration, and we have a piece of Johns Hopkins that is growing, and we have fabulous hospitals. So biotech, life sciences, those kind of industries are very much anchor industries that will, and cybersecurity in Maryland is leading the whole country. So these industries are economic drivers. They're not like any other businesses, and many of them are Iranians, Indians, and Chinese, right? Working in those fields. So what that means is, as we transition from a federal government-driven economy where employment is the way you make money, to innovation-driven economy where finding cure, taking research and commercializing it by creating companies and jobs and all that becomes the key, then there are a lot of opportunities for young people to redefine yourself and in the process redefine this region. So this is an incredibly exciting time, in whether it's from personal success factor or from community building perspective. And Montgomery County government and the whole community has been very receptive to minorities, to diversity, to cultural differences. You cannot find a more receptive community in this region. So I, in conclusion, just want to say, one, yes, definitely look for resources, get involved in the community, provide leadership, and be a cultural broker and bridge and all that. But also to create your own opportunities via entrepreneurship, via bridging out to larger communities, serving on boards, committees, and commissions. All of these things are very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. At this moment, if you have any questions, I'd like John to collect them and bring it to us to ask. Or if you want, we are in a small gathering, you can ask your own questions as well. I mean, I'm kind of flexible, whatever people like, that will do. So we have one question. Why don't you ask your questions instead of me reading it? Why don't you ask your question?
Iran Arbabi mentioned that she thought there was absolutely no chance of Montgomery County offering Farsi in her lifetime. I wonder, is there any way that the state can encourage a wider array of language offerings?
Very good questions.
Yeah,
I will
yes.
ask Young Chong.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question because I actually took a note and I think I briefly spoke with her. Like earlier I mentioned that there is a policy that was passed and I brought a copy of it so that you're all aware of it. It's called Model Policy, World Languages Credit for Proficiency. It's not that Farsi is not going to, it's language. I think it can happen because I remember how Chinese was brought in Howard County and it has to come from the voices of those who want it. So it's you that has to do it. I know you want to chime in on.
Yes, because I know that policy came after the task force wrote because it was asked by a congressman to write, and Dr. Ingold was, that panel was presided by Dr. Ingold. And they came up with some recommendations about heritage languages and the way that they could be taught in public schools. And so it was adopted, and then they came up with this policy, and following that, I'm sure that you know Ms. Susan Natter.
I was speaking with her yesterday.
Yes, and in fact, I had invited her as well, but they had the Maryland National Foreign Language Association conference today, and she gathered a group of people, and I was one of those people who was invited to that group to come up with benchmarks so that whatever we are doing in community-based schools could be used, if we reach those benchmarks, then they can, apply for credit by the public school system. And after that, I saw her several times, and I said what was going on. Whether that recommendation, because she was going to make a recommendation to the school districts, like Montgomery County, Prince George's, and so on and so forth. And there hasn't been a follow-up. So, maybe that is really what I'm asking you, whether there is any way, that someone in your place could advocate that, because I've been advocating that, and I know all of these people, and I've worked with them, and I've taken part in every meeting that they've had, and yet nothing has come out of it. I know that advocacy groups are very important because I have the experience in Montgomery County Public School, where I taught for many years, that the second Chinese immersion program was, created thanks to the parents who just advocated. However, Chinese is in a different situation right now in the United States because it's really supported by many institutions like Hamban and Confucius Institute, and we have started many courses, and you're aware of that. And for Persian, we don't have that really that. We have a powerhouse, but a different powerhouse. So we need support of some people like you who would help us also, because we are going to form advocacy groups for sure. However, we need also your support so that we can reach at least some of our goals.
That was talked about yesterday when I spoke with Susan. Actually, I put her contact information for anybody who wants to know more about this, because she's the one who's a go-to person. I can't go and say to the board, we got to do this. That's not my role. I can't do that. We have a policy. But what I can do is empower other people, like you guys, like this organization, like the community, to step up and find out, talk to your world language coordinator in Montgomery County and see what's going on with the board. It really has to come with a grassroots, is that what you say it? And I said briefly about how Howard County was able to bring in Chinese language into curriculum for high school. It took many years. And you're right, Chinese, you guys have a greater, I guess, the networking and organization. But so do you. You're a powerhouse. And for anybody to say this cannot be done is probably not, you know, you gotta talk about that. It can be done, it will take time, it will take a lot of voices, and I think ICEC is a really important place to get that going as a group.
I was going to, in follow-up to that, just to kind of, so Mariam's got her hand up too, but kind of bring together what we heard here, is that many of you probably walked in this room thinking, okay, we're going to hear about some resources available to us. And I think if there's, and there are places to go to find those resources. But I think one of the major things you might get out of after having heard Youngchan and Lily is that everyone sitting in here in this room is a resource. And the ICEC is a resource. And we are resources in two ways. One, as a group, we become advocates for our community. We become advocates for what our community needs. We need language immersion programs. We need language recognition from the state or from the county. But we also are a resource for hundreds of other things because of what we've already all experienced in our lives. So we're resources for the next generation. And that, I think, is part of what we've also, one of the themes of the whole conference has been the idea that we are a community and we need to be the resource for each other. So hopefully what you've gotten out of this is that twofold, that there are places to go for things you need, but you also, the fact that you're sitting in this room makes you a resource in some fashion, and hopefully you've gotten that out of it.
Okay, I'm sorry, we are kind of end of the discussion. I do apologize for that. I know how important it is, how everybody's excited to ask the question. I highly recommend write down your questions if you haven't responded yet. I will provide those to the panelists and they will provide the response, and all the questions and responses will be posted in our website. So with that said, I'd like to thank our panelists and offer them a small token from for our appreciation. At the same time, I'd love to thank Dina Ajali, who has been our assistant in helping us to put this package together.
Thank you all for coming.